Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:00 p.m. Welcome to the February 10th, 2025 City of Burlingame Planning Commission meeting. For all in attendance today, note that this Planning Commission meeting is being held in person and using the Zoom webinar format. Please note that we are not accepting remote public comment during commission meetings. Agenda item number 2, roll call. The record should note that 5 members of the commission are present this evening. Commissioner Pfaff and Commissioner Say are not here yet. Which brings us to agenda item number 3, request for AB 2249, remote participation. Do we have any commissioners requesting remote participation?
Commissioner Pfaff, if you can unmute yourself and go ahead and speak.
Sorry about that. I'm not used to it. Good evening, commissioners and Mr. Chair. I would like to request to participate remotely under AB 2449. I have COVID that prevents me from attending the meeting in person. There are no individuals 18 years of age or older present in this room at this remote location.
Very well.
And Commissioner Say, go ahead.
Yes, hello. I too am to this. Thank you. I would like to request to participate remotely under AB 2449 as I have a contagious illness and that prevents me from attending in person this evening. There are no individuals of any age in my remote location.
Great. Both requests are granted. All right, moving on to agenda item number 4, review of the agenda. Staff, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
There are no changes from staff.
And do we have any recusals? Nope. Okay. Moving on, agenda item number 5, public comment, non-agenda. Members of the public may speak out about any item not on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to suggest an item for future Planning Commission agenda may do so during the public comment period. The Ralph Brown Act, the state local agency open meeting law prohibits the Planning Commission from acting on any matter that is not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on any item that is not on our agenda? No. Go ahead and approach the lectern.
Good evening. I'd like to see if we can maximize the number of. Sure. I'd like to maximize the number of parking in the area here. Just one space that can be multiple spaces in the parking that we have in Burlingame. The parking in Burlingame is an issue, as all of you know. So that's my proposal for the increased number of spaces in one space. So if that can give me a chance, maybe in the future to present my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have any non-agenda items they'd like to discuss? And did we receive any public comment email?
We did not receive any before 4 p.m. So there's no supplemental informational packet.
Okay. Move on to agenda item number 6, consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine. They are acted on simultaneously unless separate discussion and/or action is requested by the applicant, a member of the public, or a commissioner prior to the time the commission votes on the motion to adopt. This evening, we only have one item on the consent calendar, item 6A, approval of the January 27th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Would any member of the public or Planning Commission like to pull this item for discussion? If not, do we have any motions?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of January 27, 2026.
I'll second that.
Great. We have a motion by Commissioner Camarado, second by Commissioner Haran. Any discussion? No? May we please have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Camarado,
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
Aye.
Commissioner Shores,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Vice Chair Haran,
Aye.
and Chair Lowenthal.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0-0-0. Agenda item number 7, action items. 2 items on the agenda this evening. First one up is agenda item 7A, 1202 Sanchez Avenue. If you are the applicant and are attending the meeting via Zoom, please raise your hand so that we may be prepared for you to speak at the appropriate time. If possible, we ask that you also turn on your video at that time. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communication regarding this project? Seeing and hearing none. Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear a staff report, please?
This application is for major design review and variance for front setback. The subject property is a flag lot that originally contained a one-story house and detached garage. The detached garage was previously demolished and will be replaced with an approved detached ADU. This project initially came in as a building permit, which was issued on July 18, 2024, for a major remodel, which included a first-floor addition at the rear of the house. This was to rebuild a non-permitted addition within the same footprint and to enclose the existing front covered porch and convert into a living area. Throughout construction of the project, the applicant submitted several revisions to the building permit to address issues with the foundation. The description in the 4th revision statement, revision number 4, stated partial foundation and framing changes. Based on that description, revised plans were only routed for structural review, and the revision was approved. The revised plans were not routed to other city divisions for review. However, the revised plans showed more extensive work than described in the revision statement, which included removal of all walls except for the front wall of the house. Removal of more than 50% of exterior walls of a house is subject to design review. Therefore, revision number 4 was issued in error since it was not properly reviewed by all city divisions. A stop work order was issued on January 22nd, 2025, and the applicant was notified to submit an application for design review. With this application, the applicant is proposing to rebuild the original one-story dwelling, including the rear first floor addition within the same footprint. The total proposed floor area would be 1,553 square feet, where 2,479 square feet is the maximum allowed. The total proposed lot coverage would be 1,568 square feet, where 1,724 square feet is the maximum allowed. The applicant is also requesting a variance for the front setback to retain the existing front setback at 16 feet, where the block average is 19 feet 2 inches. There would be a total of 3 bedrooms in the proposed dwelling. No parking is required for the ADU. And when an existing garage has been demolished in conjunction with construction of a new ADU, that covered parking does not have to be replaced. Therefore, there is no covered parking on site and no covered parking is required. However, one required uncovered parking is maintained in the existing driveway. That concludes my summary. If there are any questions of staff, I am available at this time.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for staff?
What was the date of the submission of revision 4? How long between that revision and the stop work order?
I believe the revision came in around November, and they may have removed the walls probably early January, and then a building inspector had made a site visit and discovered it and notified planning.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have. I don't know if you can hear me or see me.
Yes, we can.
Hi. Yeah, I had a similar question. I also wanted to ask, since we don't have the paper plans, I cannot tell how wide is the driveway that exists.
I'm sorry, may you please repeat your question, Commissioner Pfaff?
Sure.
About the driveway?
Yeah, it looks like I'm going to assume there is or was a driveway on the left-hand side, or is on the right-hand side. I just wanted to know the one driveway that exists, or is it not going to exist anymore? I just wanted to ask, how wide is that?
It's a little less than 9 feet. It's 8 feet 10 inches.
Is that enough to actually fit a car in?
Code requirement requires a minimum of 9 feet, so it is existing non-conforming.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you'd like to add about your project? Good evening.
Hi, my name is Olga Kramer. Thank you for having me here. Thank you to Ruben, Marco, Amelia for helping me with this process. So just to let you know that the stop work was done when inspector came in to do a rebar foundation inspection. He approved it, and then the same night I got an email that we need to stop work. So I've been working very closely with Marco, and since rebars and forms were in and we were ready to pour, and the week of nonstop rain was coming in, Marco granted me an exception to pour because otherwise all this work would go to waste and we would have to do this all over. We're using the exact same blueprint of the old house. We have not changed anything. If I knew that this was go through a design review, we would probably do something else, but we're so far into the process, so we just would like to keep the same blueprint, keep the same everything, even inside the house where it's keeping all the approved plans. The trees are there because we have to plant the trees. They might be interacting with the neighbors, and if the neighbors do not, wish to not plant the trees, so I'm not sure how this process works. I'm totally okay not to have them. I actually paid the $3,000 already to not have those trees planted because there is, I don't know. It's up to you guys, but just wanted to clear that up. Everything else is Amelia covered really well. So the foundation has been poured, and I have all the guys that are working on framing right now on the ADU that's been approved by planning. So I wanted to ask to help me, get this project approved so I can continue working.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? My only question is, why did your contractor take down the 3 exterior walls?
Because it was a part of the demo plan, because we were trying to save the original foundation, and it wasn't working. It was made out of bricks and sand, and we just couldn't. Half of the house was built on a slab. There was no foundation. It was just built on a slab. And when we took out half of the house, we dug all the trenches and everything for the new foundation, and we're trying to, whatever the word is, to tie in 2 foundations together, and the old foundation would just, it wasn't, you couldn't tie it in together. So this was the only option.
Thank you.
Commissioner Say has her hand up.
Commissioner Say, go ahead.
Oh, yes, just a couple of clarification questions. I see from your proposed front elevation that there is an attic vent up on the higher roof area. Is there an intention for that to be there? It's not on the rendering. And would there also be one in the living room? In the living room bay window, I suppose is what it is.
We are doing exposed ceilings. And we'll have a. What one? Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, we have cathedral, see, we have like exposed ceiling, and we will have a vent in the backyard because those will be closed ceilings. So I think that could be a mistake.
So
Yeah.
the proposed elevation should look like the elevations we're looking at now on the screen as opposed to the rendering?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake.
The opposite.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it's is it proposed? I can't see. Does it say it's proposed or existing?
It's, yeah, your proposed elevation shows the
Yeah.
attic vent,
I-
which
I
is
think it's
also
a
reflected
mistake.
on the rear,
Yeah.
and that's your intention.
Yeah, thank you.
And then you had spoke about it too, but I see from your reflected ceiling plan that you have a volume ceiling in that living room. So you have the 9-foot plate height. Is the volume ceiling higher than that 9-foot plate height? Or peaks at that 9-foot plate height?
No, we're keeping the existing height of the house. We just were able, since we were digging in the new foundation, we were able to lower 1 foot down. So the house will be the exact same height as the old house was. So we're not raising the house.
So your existing is 8 feet. You have an
Yeah.
8-foot plate height currently.
Yes.
Proposed is 9 feet. So
Yeah.
you are changing that ceiling. Well, you're dropping your foundation down, you said, which is how you're gaining that height.
Yes.
But can you answer the question if the tallest point of the ceiling in the living room is in line with your 9-foot plate height line or higher than that? In other words, does it go into the attic space of that living room ceiling?
Sorry, hold on 1 second.
And a connection in the wall area.
You need to speak into the microphone. Yeah, it's being recorded.
If you connection in the wall area.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear.
9 foot. We have 9 foot. If you in the center where is vaulted ceiling, we have 1 more foot, 10 foot.
So the
For-
very center is 10 feet tall.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
And then lastly, is it correct that this living room window sill is just at floor level, sort of in line with the front door? The sill of the window in the living room?
What does that mean?
The bottom of the window, is that in line with the bottom of the door on that front window?
yes.
It's exactly
yes,
the same. It's
Yes,
we
the
have
same.
not changed the
I can't
size,
hear.
so
We don't
Yeah.
change design in this house. It's the same size in the window and doors.
that's enough. Thank you. Thank you.
But you did change the window. It's a new window compared to what you had before.
New window, but same size. We
Um,
kept, because I bought the windows when we didn't even know, like, we just wanted to replace the window. So I already have the windows that I bought like in May, or not in May, in like whatever, 6 months ago. So if I would be doing this now, I would probably have a bigger window, but since I already bought them, so I'm keeping it exactly the same.
So I think what Commissioner Say is saying is in the existing house, the window doesn't go down to the floor level.
No, it doesn't.
So in the new window that you bought, it might be the same size, but are you dropping that down or are you keeping it like the same elevation on the house?
Same elevation.
Okay, so there might be a mistake then on the render on the drawing because the drawing is showing it going all the way down to the floor.
Yeah, it might be the rendering.
Okay.
Can I think
yeah,
there's.
well, your
maybe-
proposed elevations
I mean,
also
I think
reflect
What
this.
the applicant is saying is there's no change from the original submission in July, not from the existing house.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not that the existing window and the new window are the same.
Yeah.
It's the original application from July and this window are the same.
I agree, and I think Commissioner Say's question is it actually going down to the floor?
No, it's not. It stays where it was.
Okay.
Okay, stays at the 8-foot plate height. Anyway, those are my questions. I'll reserve comments for later.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I do. Jen?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a very similar question about the window. It is your original window on the house, the original house window was something like a bay that was probably an enclosed porch, a porch that was enclosed at some point. So that was a completely different window. And I'm not really sure. I don't understand how this relates to that at all. To me, this is a complete do-over. So my question would be, if it is this low, is there a reason why you picked to have a very large window put down quite so low as that? Because it looks out of proportion.
I think it's the rendering, like I have the front wall that like still stands there, and we're gonna keep the same exact way it looks. So I think rendering looks like more I don't know, modern or like but it will update the siding, but the front of the house will basically have the same view. Like it will have that same exact window. I have it sitting in the storage. Okay. I don't, my dad wants to add in.
Yeah, I'm about Lynn. We have air care in the front side, air care in the picture window. It's the same style in the existing, like we have in the new, the same style, air care and the picture window. No more changes.
No, that's not really what I'm saying. I understand it's picture window, but it's not what you had before. You're saying what you had with the previous plan when you were reusing a lot of the foundation. So it was not considered a complete, in need of a design review is the point. So for us, this is the first time we're seeing it as fresh.
I don't know if I understand how to answer this. To us, we're keeping that front wall the exact same way, like we're not changing except closing the porch and making it a living area, like that the front view won't be changing. But we were closing the porch originally in my very original submission.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions? Okay. Okay, no other questions. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on this item? Please note that speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Yeah, go ahead.
Just on that issue, if she has changed the height or anything, probably they need a structural engineer to check the seismic part of it and wind, whatever forces that needs any changing in the height, because it may be a weak link of the structure, just for your safe side of and then the city can buy off on it. That's just for their safety. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just two things here. So they won't know this because they haven't lived there, but I'm the neighbor to the side. When it rains, that area back there gets really, really like wet and floods, and it floods right down to the Sanchez side. I see in the design that they've changed it from a concrete to some grass and some pavers. So they would need to be aware that that area floods like crazy back there. And we definitely don't want it coming on our property because we're like on a lower level. We're 2 feet lower than those guys. But also for themselves, that they would need to put in like, hold on a second, they would need to put in an area drain so that it will drain out of their property and into the Sanchez side of the street. This is just something from living there, we know, okay? And then the other question I had, they are changing the roof of the house. And has there been a light survey done? Because I am very concerned about the casting shadows on our property and how it affects our light. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, one more. And then you can come back up.
Hello. I live in the unit right before where the garage used to exist. Previously, the garage would face living room and kitchen windows from where I live. And there would still be enough light that would come in to light the, to receive sunlight from the windows. My concern is about the ADU that is being placed where the garage used to be. Pillars went up today that are so high that maybe only a small peak of sky is visible now. So I'm wondering, just because in the proposed plans there's no information about what is replacing the garage that used to be there, and the height of the ADU, amount of light that would come into the windows due to the new height that's being put in place.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public attending in person wish to speak on this item? Okay. Do you want to come back up and?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see if I remember. Regarding the water, so we are doing the drainage. We created a drain around the house, around the ADU, and we're putting the downspouts into the drainage. So I also have worked very closely with Public Works to make sure that all the area around the house is going to be pervious, because they want the water to go in. And if I had to leave the concrete, like I would probably have like barrels, rain barrels throughout my whole property. So everything is going to be pervious, and we will have those downspouts connected into those drainage. So that's been approved by Public Works, like that was a big deal. And I want to make sure the foundation also stays dry and doesn't, there's no problems with foundation. The roof, originally this house seems to be, it was built in 3 stages. So 1/3 of the house was the very original. The second was built, and then that, that on slab was like just, thrown into that. So that's why the roofs were like this. So what we just did is we created like a one cohesive roof to make sense, because like if you're gonna try to do what was originally done, like it would be insane, because it had like all this crazy stuff going on. So that's why we wanted to keep the same height and of the house, and just dig down and give us more 9 feet versus 8 feet, so that hopefully you won't see much of a difference, since the roof is gonna remain the exact same level as the old house was.
Okay, we can't have a conversation back and forth, so if you can speak into the microphone.
Yes. And then I think the last one was regarding the ADU. ADU, we're building based on plans that were approved.
Can you address the commission, please? Thank you.
Yes, that were approved a while back. I think that's the only thing I can say.
Sure. Thank you very much.
If I can add also through the chair, on the ADUs are ministerial approval. There is state law and local law that allows ADUs to be built. So as long as they're building according to plans, there's no public review of ADUs, nor is it under the review of the Planning Commission. If you would like to see plans of what the approved ADU is, you're more than welcome to come and visit the Community Development Department, and we can.
Thanks, Ruben. Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing then. Commissioners, any comments? I'll just start off real quick and just address a couple of the comments that were made. Structural modifications to any building are not in our purview, but we do rely on the building department to review structural applications, and we do have a lot of faith that they get those right. But agreed that structural modifications to an exterior of a home does require a structural document. And that also goes for civil drainage. And if you are concerned, if you're an adjacent neighbor concerned about drainage, I highly recommend consulting a civil engineer and potentially in unison with the build. But the Public Works Department also thoroughly goes over drainage plans, and I would also have a lot of faith in them. In regards to this project, I like the project. I think it's a nice looking home. I think it's a shame that it came in this way. I do kind of share a few of the confusions with my fellow commissioners Say and Pfaff at the front window, because it is different than the original. It's bigger and it's definitely dropped down. So there might be some clarity there.
Yeah, my assumption is based on, the conversation that this is the design that the building department approved before we knew that the demolition would take more than 50% of the exterior walls down. So I think when the applicant is saying nothing's changed from the original design that was submitted. Clearly, it's not the same house that existed. So the roof line is different, the windows are different. So I think this is unfortunate, right? I don't think the building department nor the sponsor meant for this to happen. I think it just kind of evolved as the foundation situation became clear. But given where we're at now, I think the house is fine. I think it's nice that it's staying the same size. It could be much larger. It's on the same footprint. I think they're going to improve the site plan and permeability and trees. So I think just given the history of this, I would be inclined to approve.
I'll go. I tend to agree. It's a big window, but given the style, I don't know that it's wrong for it. So I'm okay. And the lot coverage isn't excessive. So therefore the fact that what was originally a pop-out bay is really turning into square foot, going to the ground. Okay, not a big deal. I think it provides articulation to a front elevation that would otherwise be flat anyway. So I think it actually works pretty well. I think it's important. This is a pretty streamlined design. To me, as I look at how this gets finished, even just the little beams at the top that pop out in front of the fascia a little bit, that adds articulation. That's important to me. It seems dumb, but it's important in creating a look to this elevation. If you just cover it up, it's then going to look like it went cheap and we didn't do anything nice. So I think that and that header that's over that big window, it's important that it shows. Otherwise, it'll just turn in flat on the elevation. So, it's a unique lot. It's a unique solution. I too appreciate that the attempt to live within the original footprint. And it's not, yes, it looks like it's getting higher, but it's not. And in reality, when you take out all those the intersecting roofs, it's actually going to cast probably less light on its neighbors than it does now.
Less shadow.
Or yes.
Yeah.
So I think I think I can live with what was being proposed and help them move it along.
Right. Yeah. I think it does a very good job of treading the line between some more traditional elements and more contemporary elements, which a lot of projects try to do with varying success, right? I was originally going to comment maybe put some fake attic vents back, but the more I look at the rendering, I think it's fine without it. I think it's pretty good how it is. I'm okay with that. I'm also even okay with the much larger window. I think I think it's going to be fine behind the bushes. I think it'll be all right. So I don't have anything I think that I could say that could add to the project. I'd be okay with it. And I also wanted to echo the comment about the roof. I was going to mention with the unified roof line, it's probably going to cast less shadow now, all things considered.
Well, we do have a special accommodation for setback. Anyone have any issue with that? Existing setback?
Since it's existing and an existing footprint now.
Yeah. So do we have any motions?
Through the chair,
Chris-
Say and Pfaff have their hand.
All right. Let's do Commissioner Say first.
Thank you. Yes, I generally agree with my fellow commissioners. I think I have no issue with using that larger window that's been ordered for the living room, but I'm just thinking from the inside with a 10-foot peak of the volume ceiling, it may look better and relate better to the interiors, can relate better to the window if that window is hiked up a bit, maybe at least in line with the top of the door, the entry door at like an 8-foot plate height. Also, if there's the next go round, just to clarify, I think I heard that the attic vents are going to be in the front and rear elevations for the tallest ridged roof. Sorry for the binging. I'd like clarification whether that is indeed to be there or not. I do agree that's a nice clean style and a nice approach to reusing an existing footprint and updating the look of the house. So not trying to put too much burden on them with the larger living room window. I just think it would look better, relate better to both the exterior and interior if it was raised up a little higher. And I also can support the front setback variance request. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pfaff?
Yes, I have similar comment to Commissioner Say. I personally, I think it's going to look very strange from the inside to have a window that is that low. I would consider putting it up about the level of the door or the door cutout. What is that? Whatever that is, the overhang. That's maybe a foot. I have no idea, but I think it would altogether could be large like that, but I think it would look better personally. I also wondered about, yeah, it's sleek and that's all good. But maybe you might want to consider a couple of these outrigger things like, I don't know, they can be sleek, just a sort of a post coming out with the front sort of carved, like the neighboring house across the street, or maybe one block up has some of those. That might look really nice and kind of finish it off. And the most relevant comment I have is I'm concerned about parking because it is very tough on that block, and there's really nowhere to park. And I am concerned that I love the idea of having these two trees there. I was happy to see that change. but I actually don't think that both trees will fit. I think they're going to be hit or something because it's not going to take long for people to start parking on the front yard. It's just going to happen because there's nowhere else to be. And so I was going to suggest that maybe you speak with our parks, the Public Works Parks liaison, Ellen. Perhaps there is a way that you could move one. I think there's jacaranda, but I forgot now. My head is so stuffy. Maybe you'd be able to move the one jacaranda to the back. And that might beautify the lot, beautify the area for the neighbors that are going to have the ADU now much closer to them. And it just might soften it. And so I ask you to consider that. And if you do that, then of course the appropriate irrigation so that that tree has a chance to survive and beautify the property. And those are my comments.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay. Do you have any motions?
So there was definitely a few items there that were brought up. And given that this is an action item, we're actually not looking at it again if we're going to push it forward. So we are going to have to make a motion that passes and sends them on their way.
Mhm.
So I don't, whether it be outriggers or raising the window or attic vents, can we pass this as it is proposed? Or are we saying they need to come back with changes?
Through the chair, you could also include conditions of approval in your motion, in the action.
I personally don't disagree with anything Commissioner Say or Pfaff said. However, I don't personally need those things included to pass it forward. I'm not sure how the rest of the commission feels.
I would agree with you.
Right.
Okay, then I'm going to make a motion that we approve this project as drawn. And including the setback variance request. And
For the findings in the resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sounded good.
And then we can discuss it. Agreement stuff.
Just to clarify, as drawn, because the rendering and the elevations are different. So I think the applicant said the elevation of the front is,
Incorrect.
it was correct. The rendering, sorry.
The rendering.
Was correct.
Right.
So per the rendering
The rendering with
for the front and the elevation for the back. Okay,
Without vents.
right, yeah. I second that motion.
Sorry, I wanted to jump in. She did mention the attic vents though are intended to be in the front and back elevation. So that's not clear to me.
I don't
Yeah.
think so, Commissioner Say. I think she said it was a mistake and that the rear was correct, but the rendering is correct, not the elevation for the front.
Oh, okay. So maybe I misheard that.
Okay, well, we have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, seconded by Commissioner Haran. Do we have additional discussion on that motion? Then I will ask for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Camerado,
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff,
No,
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
Commissioner Shores,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Vice Chair Horn,
Aye. Chair
Lowenthal.
Aye. The motion passes 6-1-0-0. Congratulations. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an fee of $900, which includes noticing costs. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7B, 1818 Truesdale Drive. If you are the applicant and are attending the meeting via Zoom, please raise your hand so we may be prepared for you to speak at the appropriate time. If possible, we ask that you also turn on your video at that time. Were any commissioners not able to visit this project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communication regarding this project? Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we have a staff report, please?
This application is for a master sign program for a new projecting sign above the first story on an assisted living facility building. The application includes a new projecting sign that is 50 square feet per side on the Truesdale Drive frontage, located on the second and third stories of an existing 4-story assisted living facility building. The proposed projecting sign would consist of a double-faced painted aluminum cabinet and be internally illuminated. In addition, 2 existing wall signs at the ground floor building entrance would be replaced with a new non-illuminated wall sign that is 8 square feet in size. If there are any questions of staff, I'm available at this time.
Do we have any questions for staff? No? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you'd like to add about your project?
Thank you. My name's Andrew Moret. I'm here on behalf of Oakmont Management Group, the the management company overseeing the community. Thank you for your time, commissioners and chairmen. We are looking, as we said, to add this sign to the side of the community on the Truesdale side of our assisted living community. Currently, it's a luxury senior living facility that houses about, when full, 100 residents and employs a little over 75 team members of the local community. And we recently took management of the community in 2024. And during that transition, the previous operator didn't have any signage. So it's led to a lot of confusion at the community as to what it is. As you can see, it kind of looks like a apartment complex, which has led to some confusion of people coming in, looking to rent an apartment. So we feel like the signage would help clarify some of that. Also, we put some time in on the design to make sure that it wasn't, a sore thumb out on the street. It will be illuminated, but won't have a direct line of sight to anything residential or the apartment complex across the street. On the illuminated facing side across Truesdale is, I believe it's a post-acute health facility, so nothing residential on that side. Do you have any questions for me?
Let me ask. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Do you have any pictures of how it's illuminated? Do you have any?
If the staffer could click through, I don't know if we have a night rendering. That's the dimensions and it from a couple of different angles.
Yeah, I didn't see a night render.
Yeah,
Number 5 is night.
I guess that would.
Far right is supposed to be night view.
The same.
Yeah.
Hard to articulate night on
Would-
this
Is
paper.
there a way to bring us kind of or send us an image? Is it?
Well, we haven't installed the signs.
Do, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a loaded question and a hot debate topic right now. We could throw it in the old ChatGPT, I guess. It's LED lit, so it's soft illumination. So it shouldn't really give off, it should illuminate itself, but it won't be bright. Yes.
It's not going to be the bright white that.
Yes.
Can I ask, the reality is just the Oakmont luxury senior living is going to be pushed through letters with light coming through. The rest of it's going to be dark.
Yes, it'll be an aluminum.
The green isn't going to have any illumination.
That is correct during the
But
nighttime.
get
The light.
minimal.
Got it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on this item? No? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments?
I think this looks like a fine project forward.
Agreed.
So do we have any motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve this per the drawings and the conditions
And the findings.
and the findings.
Solution.
The findings in the.
Sometime this year, I'll figure this out.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, seconded by Commissioner Camerado. Any other discussion on the motion? May we please have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Camerado,
Aye.
Commissioner Foff,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
Commissioner Shores,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Vice Chair Horn,
Aye.
Chair Lowenthal.
Aye. Vote passes 7-0-0-0. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $900, which includes noticing costs. Thank you. Congratulations. Okay, moving along to agenda item number 8, study session. Broadway specific plan update and emerging vision framework discussion.
Good evening, commissioners. Netta Zayer, Community Development Director. I am joined this evening with MIG Consulting Group that is helping the city in preparation of the Broadway specific plan. Dan here will be giving the majority of the presentation. I just wanted to give a little bit of background and context to what we're doing, and then Dan will do a deep dive into some history, some engagement that we've done that has led us to this point, and the emerging vision framework, which will be the bulk of the discussion tonight and what we're looking for feedback from the Planning Commission on. We're in the stage of our process right now where we've gone to City Council to float the draft vision framework to them and then to you all tonight, and then we'll be going out to the community at large through a workshop, pop-up event, and a couple of other engagement opportunities to gauge the broader community's feedback. I want to tee the discussion up to clearly point out two key things that this specific plan is trying to do. It's actually trying to do double duty. We've heard through the general plan update process that happened and got adopted in 2019 that there was a desire from the business community or the community at large to do a specific plan for this area to take a closer look at the Broadway business district area to see if there's any enhancements, improvements, what the future of that area could look like. So this is fulfilling that goal and that direction from that general plan to look at it. And it's also fulfilling some objectives through MTC. So the Metropolitan Transportation Commission that governs the public transit in this area has established some transit-oriented communities policies. And this was based around their 2050 Bay Area vision in improving ridership and increasing public transportation in the Bay Area in general. And these policies are intended to partner with that objective and set regulatory frameworks around the transit centers to increase ridership and mobility and build transit-oriented development. These policies do require the city to change its regulations around our stations. So that would be Broadway, the Broadway station, North Rollins Road because of its proximity to the Millbrae station, and then downtown. We would have to look at these areas and the regulations around them and try to align them with these policies. You could look at it as the carrot or you could look at it as the stick that MTC is using, is that it is tying its OBAG funding to these policies. So the city, as well as many other cities in the area, rely on OBAG funding for some of the transportation improvements we do. They are tying a city's voluntary compliance with these policies to the funding that they will receive in future OBAG policies. There is going to be obviously a broader discussion that will need to be had with council if the city wants to opt into these transit-oriented communities policies as a broad general philosophy and approach. But right now, we've been crafting and designing the Broadway specific plan as if these policies would be incorporated because of the proximity of this area to the Broadway station. That's a lot of background, but it's key information because you're going to see increased FARs and parking requirements in this plan that necessarily didn't come out of the community engagement to date, but are in there because the policies that would govern this area would require us to do so. So know that it's doing double duty. A lot of it is based on what the community said in our engagement so far, and then some of it is based on these policies. Any questions before I hand it over to Dan? Right, we appreciate your time and your feedback. It's going to be really helpful for us as we continue to move through the process.
I do have a question. Is Dan going to be going over these MTC policies in his portion of it, or going to be just talking about the plan piece?
At a high level, he will be. So the pieces that are directly from the TOC policies, he'll call out.
Okay.
It's a lot more policies beyond just this, so we're not going into the full spectrum of them.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Dan Amazon with MIG. Let me just do a screen share here. I'll get the presentation up and running.
So you have to accept the invitation to be promoted to the panelists.
Okay, there we go.
Oh.
It's a little delayed. Just a little bit. All right, there, we're up and running. Well, appreciate the time in front of the commission this evening. So we're about halfway through this process to update the specific plan for Broadway. And our overall boundary, the focus of this project is really on the Broadway corridor, but we're actually looking from California to El Camino Real, from Lincoln to Carmelita. So taking into account the entire neighborhood, so to speak, as you can see in this map, not looking for a lot of overall zoning changes within the area, but as part of this project, we are looking at circulation, connections, and how parking will work with various changes or concepts as part of this plan. And in particular, we've heard from the advisory committee and also community, parking not only along Broadway, but also in the surrounding community is something that is really a high concern, and the management of the parking, but also the volume. So we want to make sure, and council directed us early on to include this entire area as part of the planning process. However, the core focus is really on the Broadway corridor and the Broadway station. So as Netta mentioned, how this project started, it really came out of the city's 2019 general plan update, which looked at forming a future vision for the Broadway corridor. The general plan established Broadway mixed use, so some initial land use direction on the opportunity to create second or third story residential along the corridor, and some incremental changes. But in addition, the local business community also really had a desire to have a specific plan or a more focused planning look at this area from a streetscape perspective, but also circulation, mobility, again, parking and land uses as well. And as Netta mentioned, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission does have a policy around high capacity transit areas to look at increased density for housing in particular, and additional bus or active transportation components that could be supported by that. So all of these are working together, but ultimately this is the cities and communities plan. So some of the city's goals for this project really broken into sort of three big categories: updating policies or zoning for some of these tactile changes within the area. And you'll probably hear me say tactile a lot. This is a very constrained area, as we know. The Broadway corridor is very narrow. There's not a lot of vacant land aside from city surface parking lots. So it is a very, very tactile sort of project of looking at some of this incremental change. From a policy perspective, we're looking at the opportunity for more affordable housing or more types or different unit sizes of housing that could work in this area, but really trying to support economic development, support the local business community, and align with general plan policies as we're creating this more focused look. From an infrastructure standpoint, improving safety and accessibility, we did an inventory of currently identified historic resources, but also potential resources as well, looking at the building stock and evaluating parking exceptions, parking management, sort of all aspects of parking. And then from the mobility side, thinking about bicycle and pedestrian network and access to the bayfront and also different parts of the city, increased transit access, regional connections, given the station's location. So here's our overall schedule. We are in sort of the yellow dashed. We're actually kind of in the midpoint of the process, but going to be moving towards a lot of community discussions around some of these concepts and ideas, and eventually coming back to commission and council with some direction on major components of the plan. But as part of this planning process, MIG, in addition with our partners at Bay Area Economics and TJKM Traffic Engineers, we really did a pretty deep dive initial assessment on economics and some of the economic conditions that are in play today, inventory of physical assets, so that's the building form, character, functionality of current spaces, and a lot of analysis on the mobility components and transit. So trying to get a lot of baseline information. We have a community advisory committee that has been very active throughout this process. We met actually with them 3 times to talk about issues, opportunities, but also go through existing conditions and context information. We've also held a series of pop-up events along the corridor, as well as a community workshop and an online survey to get some initial community feedback on some of these ideas or concepts and whether they're worth considering or studying a little bit further. This is a list of all of our project meetings. You can see there's been quite a few so far. We do have many more or several more anticipated, including a workshop coming up later this month. So trying to get a lot of community discussion and input around some of these emerging ideas for the Broadway area. We also have a technical advisory committee. So this is senior city staff in public works, parks, other departments that have been looking at details and concepts as they started to arise. This is a quick summary of 3 different meetings, but as you can see, there's a lot of great assets. You know, Broadway is really the heart of Burlingame. Wonderful local small business. It's very walkable. There's areas that could be enhanced, obviously, from a safety standpoint, but has a very unique character within the community. But there's also a lot of challenges and opportunities. And the ability to address these through the planning process is really a key focus. And that includes streetscape improvements, but also just wayfinding, getting around the neighborhood, the complexity of it, and ways we can look at improving some of the signage and access to the area. Similarly, our Community Advisory Committee has had a lot of input on similar assets about the quaint feel and character of Broadway, but also a lot of challenges or opportunities as we go through this process. One big one is really retaining Broadway's character and making sure, you know, we're not losing the unique charm of the area, but creating opportunities for more parking, more accessibility, active ground floor uses. We've had a lot of discussions around community events. So one thing that's come up a lot from the workshop, but also the CAC, is that there's not really a community gathering space, an outdoor plaza or an area within Broadway to linger or spend time. Landscaping improvements, also some other challenges, loading and unloading of vehicles. So a lot of different constraints or concerns that we're starting to look at some initial solutions to. So this is a quick summary of the community engagement process that included both the first open house workshop as well as the survey. And we tested a few different, what we call vision elements: welcoming, housing, thriving, connected, safe, and active, which all pulled pretty well, but people had a lot of ideas and feedback about what those actually mean from an implementation standpoint. We did also talk about the streetscape improvements and potential changes for Broadway itself. And there was A lot of desire for wider sidewalks. However, there's also concerns about losing parking as part of that. So there's definitely a balance there, just given the tight right-of-way of the street and how constrained it is. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the Merging Broadway Vision Framework and really why we have this. It's sort of a initial high-level overview of the specific plan itself. But the way the framework works is it gives us high-level components of the draft plan, but starts to get into some initial ideas, strategies, and things to test further, excuse me, analyze further based on community feedback, but also best practices, the results of the existing conditions analysis, and some of the technical work as well. And so there's initially 5 vision elements, and then goals, strategies, and actions that build off of that. And this approach is because it's a little bit of a land use plan, but also a strategic plan. The Business Improvement District has been very much involved in this process. And there's a lot of things around activations and events and activities and ways the city can partner with the bid to try and create more energy in there. So it's a little bit different than a traditional land use plan that's just a zoning map and a mobility map. Trying to also get a lot of partnerships and activities as part of this as well. So I'll go in these a little bit more detail, but our 5 vision elements are welcoming. So we want to make sure this is an inviting place for residents, business owners, workers, and visitors. It's supportive, so it's a destination for a mix of housing, near jobs, near transit. It's thriving, so it's a place to grow locally serving and dynamic businesses. So that's a vision element specifically for supporting the business community. It's connected, so pedestrian, bicycle, multimodal corridor, vehicles as well, how we are better connecting Broadway. And it's also active, so it's a dynamic destination. There's programmed events, activities, and spaces as well. So the way the vision element or the vision framework works is each of these 5 elements are then supported by further goal strategies and actions. And this is what we're going to take to the community later this month through a workshop, not only with some of these initial goals and strategies, but also some options as well. This is the overall blueprint that was in your packet. There's a lot of information here, but I'm going to highlight a few key points as part of this presentation. So under welcoming, we have 3 key strategies: enhancing Broadway's gateway as with unique design elements, building upon the arc and the sign. Is there additional ways to create a unique character for the area? A2 is creating a consistent and clear signage and branding program. And this is to help people be able to move through the area easier, find parking areas, just to provide some clarity as people are moving through the area. But also supporting creative placemaking elements like murals, public art, and markers. So in a little more detail there, this strategy dives a little bit more detailed, as this map shows, and is looking at areas where not only there's large enough walls to do murals, but really building upon some of those mid-block pedestrian mews. And a few of them have connections back to the city parking area. Most don't, though. They're actually old utility corridors. But looking at the way of just further connecting the corridor to some of the parking lots, making it easier and more obvious for movements and activities, and looking at ways to re-energize these mid-block sort of utility corridors, but they can, again, be mews, gain access to parking. So again, looking at some of those strategic interventions or strategies. So supportive, this really gets into housing, leveraging the transit-oriented opportunity given the station. We do know there are some questions about the future of the station. We're using this process to try and advocate for more stops at the station. That's something definitely the business community and local community has said they really, really want. But looking at some specific strategies for how we address this, given this is a pretty focused area. So B1 is a key strategy. And this one, we started to look at what this map is showing is looking at what essentially are vacant or underutilized opportunity sites or corner sites like some of the gas stations. And really this is leveraging, for the most part, city public property, which is the parking lots, as a potential for additional housing opportunities incrementally along the corridor. So what this is showing right now is actually the city's current zoning for this area. We're just starting to look at how some of these building prototypes at the city's current density would work on a series of different sites. And in this sort of analysis, it's around 101 new residential units and 127 new parking spaces. And that comes out to about 50 or so dwelling units per acre. Again, this is the city's current zoning for the Broadway area based on that mixed-use general plan land use designation. As Netta mentioned earlier, we also have the MTC policy. So we looked at their policy, which largely is around bumping up density to 75 units per acre, but also reducing parking requirements as well. And that's a key MTC policy because it's a transit-oriented area. It's envisioned to be walkable to transit. So we started to analyze what that would look like under MTC's policy, which again is an option for the city, but we wanted to understand that from a physical design standpoint. So that gets around 173 new residential units. So under thriving, again, quite a few different strategies, but this overall goal section is how can we further help support the business community and economic development goals along the corridor as well. So one key strategy, C2, diversify and innovate the local business experience. So here, what we're talking about is encouraging not only new uses and businesses, but providing flexibility and more outdoor areas. So when I refer to something like encouraging new uses or businesses, we're also going through the zoning code and seeing if there are arduous standards that are maybe preventing flexibility for business owners. We want to try and make it a flexible as we can area, but really, again, trying to support those local mom and pop businesses. So the outdoor amenity zones like parklets, wider sidewalks is part of this strategy as well. And again, this is a constrained corridor. So as we can see in these two different street sections, the one at the top is the existing section that has diagonal parking. We're evaluating what if that becomes parallel parking, you lose some parking spaces, but you gain more sidewalk space. So there's always trade-offs with some of these options, but we want to start to test them, given the community feedback, to try and create wider sidewalks and more outdoor space. D, again, is getting to connected. And one thing we heard quite a bit from the pop-up events, but also from the community workshop, and actually I think also from Public Works as well, is that adding bike lanes directly to Broadway is a huge challenge. One, is just a very constrained corridor, but also it poses some safety issues just given the amount of activities and things that are happening. So looking more at bike lanes on side streets, but connections to Broadway on local streets. D1 is a key strategy, create a safer, more comfortable circulation pedestrian network with more sustainable landscapes, trees, designs as well. So again, kind of building on that idea of wider, more flexible sidewalks, provide additional opportunities for trees, for landscaping, for shade, and for some of these outdoor activities as well. But also key to this is several sort of focus or tactile improvements along Broadway itself. So as you can see in this diagram, we're identifying intersections for improved crosswalks, maybe improved bulb outs as well, potentially pedestrian beacons, which is something we talked about with City Public Works. Again, trying to make this a safe area, just given that Broadway is a key connection between two state facilities, 101 and El Camino Real. And the last section is active. So this is looking at those events, activities, ways the city can partner with the bid and business owners. So encouraging outdoor program special events. So we started to look at areas where this could happen, the potential of maybe one or two blocks that become more of a flush curb. And during certain events or weekends, it can become an outdoor gathering spot. This street section, the bottom shows the potential for that. It would be an area where parking would be removed, maybe just in one area, but but it's something we're testing along with the traffic firm to make sure we understand, if it could work from an operational standpoint. So that's a high-level overview. There's a lot of components that are in this emerging framework, but the next steps, we do have some upcoming meetings coming up later this month and early March. We're going to have a pop-up event at the Farmers Market on February 23rd, and then another big community workshop on the 26th of this month to get a lot of feedback on all of these concepts and strategies, what people like, what maybe they're concerned about, and then take that feedback and some refined strategies back to Planning Commission and Council, moving towards some preferred alternatives later in spring of this year and a draft plan in summer of this year. So that's a high-level overview, but I'll pause for any questions from the Commission.
Thank you very much. I have one off the top question. Does any of this framework take into an assumption of the grade separation at the Caltrain tracks, or is it completely independent of that project?
It is taking into consideration the grade separation. There's been a few different designs just during our process that there has been for the grade separation. So we are looking at the potential for additional pedestrian connections to that project. There are some questions about whether the station will be a part of it or not a part of it. So we're trying to be flexible because that's outside the full purview of the city, but this project is hoping grade separation and station remain and become an active piece of the rest of this process. So we are assuming that it is going to happen, but if it doesn't, there could definitely be options within the plan to look at intersection improvements in that scenario.
I personally love the idea of the larger sidewalks and the parallel parking as opposed to the diagonal, but I can only imagine how much of a nightmare that would be if there was no grade separation and people are trying to parallel park into rush hour time, which is already a nightmare, and trying to get cars in and out of there it would be worse. So just one thing that stuck out.
Go ahead.
Just a couple of questions. On the overall timeline, it feels slow to me. It's been almost 2 years now, and we've only had 3 community advisory meetings and only 1 or 2, I guess, no, 1 workshop, and the second one's upcoming. Is this a typical timeline? It feels slow.
We did get a little bit delayed over the summer with city staff transitions, but we're now sort of ramping back up in the new year.
What happens to parking, given that most of the spots that you're looking for residential kind of mixed use are over the current parking lot? So is there any parking in the plan at this point to replace those?
Yes, so there is parking within these new projects that will support the new projects. There is, and we're looking at options of parking directly on Broadway itself if it was changed to other components. There has been some discussion, and we're doing some analysis around a parking structure as a way to also consolidate it. And when we head to the workshop, we're going to also provide some information as one of council's feedbacks on some of the costs around that as well. So there's the location and volume and programming, but also the cost if something like a new structure were created on one side, how that would actually be funded or financed.
Just make sure I'm clear. So the mixed use that would be put on municipal lots would satisfy parking for just those folks in the apartments that are created. We'd lose parking on Broadway going to parallel. So it seems like we have a big negative on the parking. Am I seeing that correctly?
Do you mind if I jump in?
No, sure.
Negative in terms of we're losing a lot of spaces. Yeah. Yeah.
And it can take many forms, right? So it can be public parking on structures with other use on top, and you can supplement and have, if the project only needed 100 parking spaces, you could do 300 spaces and open it up. So those are city-owned parking lots. You have flexibility to kind of design them the way that you want to. Some cities have them play dual purpose, some just make them private development. It's really, that's the feedback we're looking for. If we were to make them available what would be some things we'd want to see happen?
Right. Yeah, just the practical challenges, they bump up against the residential areas. So then you're at a height limitation that's going to just limit the amount of parking you can put on a podium before you get the housing above it.
And maybe you make some lots available and some just a parking garage, you know, you can.
Yeah.
wanna use.
My 2 cents is take the Goodwill and the gas station on the corner of Broadway and California and put a structure there. It's a big piece of property when you combine all of that. And then, yeah, I lost. Oh, just the traffic plan worries me. I think these two-way streets are challenging. So I just encourage you to look at Grove, Lincoln, Sanchez, Carmelita, potentially making them one way in and out. So just lighten, just spread the load across 5 streets rather than have them. The two-way streets are challenging to navigate with parking so tight.
So I have a couple comments. So I grew up at the 1300 block of Paloma, and I can tell you that I still own that property. And I can't, when I go visit, well, when my mom was still alive and I went to visit her, I couldn't get out of the driveway. So what's happening on the 1300 blocks is people from Broadway who are working at Broadway or who want to travel to Broadway are parking down the street. And so there is no parking. There's no way to, you can't even sometimes get through the streets because you have two cars parked on either side. And so you can't even get through. So I think whatever you do, I agree with Chris here. I think whatever you do, you have to do it all the way to Grove, because Grove gives you a little bit more leeway and it's a little bit of a wider street. And I think you have to go to Sanchez. Sanchez is packed. You can't get in and out of those properties and or drive down to either side of El Camino and El Camino and California Drive. So I know you're trying to stay confined, but because it's such a tight area, I think you have to you may want to open it up a little bit more and look at what's going on there. I will tell you, I got a ticket because I didn't see somebody crossing the road there at the Wells Fargo, and I was slow on the roll, but I didn't see that light. So I didn't see that pedestrian crossing, and I worry about the people seeing each other. I can't see, there's too many blind spots in the corners for the pedestrians. And we've got a lot of kids that like to go down there to Preston's and Walgreens and putz around. So I would hope that we can open those areas up a little bit more to be able for the cars to see a little bit more what's going on.
One of the ideas the plan has is doing the bulb out. So you're pushing the pedestrian out further into the street so there's more visibility for those. So at those key intersections to see if there's enough room to create some extensions of those corners so it creates better visibility. We heard that too a lot.
But I would say the bulb outs make it a lot harder to drive. I don't actually like most of the bulb outs we've done in the last few years. They make, California is now a lot more difficult to drive and more dangerous because we're right up against the cars that are parked. I've tried to get in my car there and been threatened.
I think it would be good to see some alternatives than the bulb out. Like, give us a couple of different options on those, just to give us a look of how it kind of feels. I would say, and I don't know how my fellow colleagues feel about this, there is a huge jam up of traffic that's coming off of 101 to Broadway. As we're coming off of 101, we make that right-hand turn before you get to kind of, what's that first, Rollins Road, like going to the left, and then to Auto Pride, where Auto Pride is. There's a ton of confusion and traffic that's happening there, and people don't know where to go. And I'm hoping that with this whole moving of whatever we do on Broadway, that we can actually look at the traffic there, because people are cutting in front of other people. People are jamming into lanes. They think they should go to the right, but then they want to go to the left. So I feel like we have to also take into consideration what's happening there and bring that piece, whatever happens with the train, we still have to fix that other side, because it just seems like it's chaos. I stay off of Broadway as much as possible. I try not to go there during the middle of the day. Traffic is horrendous. And if you get caught on Broadway or on California trying to make the left to go onto the freeway, you're probably there at least 10 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes at least. I brought this up at a meeting. I don't know if anybody heard me, but I do, this is not going to go over well. I think people should not park on the street on those blocks. I don't know that people should be parking unless you live on those streets and you have a permit, that you should not be parking on those streets where houses are, because we can't get through. There is no way that on a 1300 block of Paloma, on a day that's packed, you can get a fire truck down that road. I doubt it. I really doubt it. And so it worries me. I've had the ambulance at my mom's house several times, and it was tight. And so maybe we have to go to permits for parking so that residents and only residents can park on the street. And I know that's not going to go over well, but something's got to give here for safety for the residents.
Commissioner Fluff.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I have a couple of questions. First of all, piggybacking on what my fellow Commissioner Camarado just mentioned, I don't think that the area east of Broadway, so we're beyond California and then over the tracks, et cetera, that little node, I don't think that's included in the plan, but I do see, I agree, I see virtue in, it's a little late, but I see virtue in including it because it is total chaos. And, we may not have a station. I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen. And with a plan, I almost would assume the worst, because kind of looking that way. So I do wonder if there's a better way to kind of organize things there so people are more prone to going where they're planning on going rather than switching at the last minute. The other issue is you showed two maps. I think you showed two maps, and one said this is the current plan you have now, and then there was a second one that said this is MTC's plan. I don't know if you could put those back on. And it was far as the density of these mixed-use buildings, if you were able to switch back to that slide.
I can't right now, but the density difference was 50 units per acre versus 75, which is 74 technically, which is MTC's TOC policy for any community that has a high volume train station, like the Broadway station.
Yeah, okay, so let's just presume for a moment, let's take the train station out of it. So I just wanted to know, and this is all not your fault. This started a long time ago, and the state keeps increasing their demands on the housing. But I'm just looking at what we have learned the state mandates can do, and I don't think it's just 3 stories. I think it's 5, 6, 7. I don't know. I mean, it can be multiple stories. So I was wondering, regardless of where the spots are that you've picked or that you've discussed and feel they're appropriate or whatever it may be, I was wondering if you could possibly make a diagram showing the allowable actually right now, what is allowed by the state of California as far as affordable housing, how many let's not talk acre, whatever it is, people per acre, whatever it is, just what is allowed as far as stories on a building. At least I think that's the way it goes. Maybe I'm completely wrong. How that looks right now. It would be interesting to see that. And it also is a comment that even if we do or we don't have a train station, Broadway is really it's Burlingame's only exit off of 101. Only one. There's half of a exit at our border, a peninsula, but that's pretty much it. And so that's not going to go away. It is always going to be a freeway on-ramp and off-ramp. And so the congestion and especially if we're adding a lot of density, which is probably allowable just by the rules we have now, I remain very concerned about impacts on people, the parking is going to become worse, I think. And I just am having trouble. These are beautiful pictures you show. You've done a really beautiful job. I don't mean to take anything away from that. You have great ideas. I'm just having a really difficult time finding how the two can meet with what is allowable now as far as density. And the last thing is simply a question. In the very beginning, we discussed the Muse, and I wanted to know, but I can't remember if I ever got an answer, or maybe you weren't able to find out. Are the Muse public property or they belong to the utility? And those are my comments. Thank you.
Sure. And I'll mention for the Muse, they are utility easements. And Joe, if we know constraints on those, but we can look into that for sure. There are utility easements currently. So there is the opportunity to work with the utility provider to have additional city public easements as a strategy. As far as state density bonuses and different state allowances around housing, it is always changing, as I think we all know. But right now for this corridor, it's essentially a 3-story height, but under state rules, and we can provide more detail on this as we refine the workshop materials, you can get essentially 2 more stories if it's a 100% affordable project. And there's additional parking waivers to that as well. So that is one state housing density bonus law, but we can start to model that so the community can see how that would relate to this corridor. Again, if it's a 100% affordable project, then they could use that density bonus.
Appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
I have one more thing. This area is so tight, and I really don't, my personal opinion is I don't know that we can support a building that's 5 stories down here on this site, because I don't think that this area could support a lot more people. And I'm for density and I'm for affordable housing, and I'm a proponent of that, but I think that this is the wrong place. We already have multi-units down here. We have condos down here. We have single-family homes down here. We have it's like a little sardine pack right there. And I just don't think that this is the place. If we want to open up more affordable housing, I think we should open up more of Rollins Road and that area, because I think that there's more land there and we can go up a little higher and grander versus on Broadway.
Or even more so going up and down California. Because if you go down
Yeah.
to Carlos, they've built a lot of units right along the train tracks and created a lot more use. Whereas, and I would say either side of California would be better.
Yeah.
We've got several projects that have been in play for a while that
are not
moving forward.
Yeah.
Because the money isn't there and they don't pencil.
And that's a key. I want to be very clear. The existing regulations now, as Dan mentioned, allow housing there. And so our existing zoning that's been in place for 6, 7 years now allow housing in that area. It's important to make the distinction between the regulatory framework and the reality of if things are going to get built. You know, the regulations may allow it, but because they don't pencil, the sites are small, they are small parcels, that doesn't mean that they're ever going to build to that capacity. There's a lot of factors that come in play. I just want to be very clear that we're not raising any misconception that right now housing is allowed in that area, regardless of the Broadway specific plan moving forward or not. That is already a possibility there.
So I have a question. Can we change that specific plan though, under the purview of what we're going to be doing? Can we say we would rather not see housing in this area?
So that's all council always has the ability to change the general plan and the zoning in the city. That is married with our housing element that has RENA numbers and this added layer that I've mentioned of the MTC TOC policies that are also requiring density. And those are all factors that come in play. So simple answer, yes. And then you have to balance that with the entirety of the city and what the council wants to do as that relates to our housing element and RENA numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments from the commission?
Is this technically our like discussion of the study, or would that be until after the rest of public comment?
I think we've kind of cart before the horse.
Just checking. If in that case, I can just add, I think it's kind of crazy how well Broadway works. Well, how well Broadway balances the different needs it has right now, which is to say that it is basically a highway on-ramp and also a Main Street commercial corridor, and somehow neither of those groups of people are at each other's throats every single day. Somehow people walk down the street, somehow people use that to get on and off the highway, myself included on both ends. What that means to me is that when it comes to something like an action that might reduce parking or decrease throughput on Broadway, I'm fine with that. I just think that on a neighborhood level, that needs to be a push and a pull. So if we're taking parking off of Broadway for whatever reason to get wider sidewalks, great. We should also be looking at getting a parking structure of some kind to consolidate the parking lots we have, because that balance is very easily thrown off. If we're going to put bulb outs on Broadway, I think that's great. I think that would make it a safer pedestrian environment. But then we should also be looking at making some of those parallel streets like Sanchez more accommodating to people getting to California and then across the railroad tracks. So whatever happens there, I think it needs to be something that on the whole as a neighborhood doesn't decrease throughput, not on Broadway as a street, but from one side of the neighborhood to the other. I think you can do a lot if you look at it from that perspective. I just wanted to add as well, in terms of parking, I do want to caution people to be very careful what they wish for when it comes to parking in housing structures. When I moved here, I was getting ready to sell my car, and I chose the place that I did on Floribunda in Burlingame because it was close to a grocery store, the rail station, downtown, all these other things I could walk to. And as it so happens, my apartment on Floribunda has a parking space underneath it for free with my apartment, right? I was planning on selling my car, but since there was already an off-street parking spot, I figured I'd tow it here with me. And so I did. And so now Burlingame has one more car that is occupying space at red lights and taking up parking spots at Broadway, because that's typically how I get there instead of going on a nicer, slightly longer walk. So when you increase parking availability at these structures, that does decrease parking pressure in other places, but it's also going to induce parking at other places that are already also very constrained. And I don't say this as an abstract, I say it because I am a personal example of that. I am traffic, I am constrained parking because I had a free parking spot at my apartment. So just putting that out there.
Do we now open it for the public comment?
Yes, if you're done with questions, you can open up to public comment and then go into your discussion.
Any other comments or questions before we open up to public? Okay, do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on this item? Please note that speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Go ahead.
Hello. For those of you who don't already know me, my name's Howard Wetton. I was on the Traffic Safety and Parking Commission for 10 years. We studied Broadway extensively. Right after I stepped off the Traffic Commission, my, at the time, 11-year-old daughter was hit by a car in the middle of Broadway. What we learned when we studied it is that parking, particularly at mealtimes, lunch, dinner, particularly dinner, is severely constrained, as you probably all already know. The woman who hit my daughter said she was eyeballing a parking spot and didn't see my very tall 11-year-old right in the middle of the street. So my view aligns, I think, with I most recently heard from Commissioner Shores. I think parking is so constrained at Broadway that you really should not do anything there unless you're willing to put a structure in. And we did do that in downtown Burlingame. I think it's worked pretty well, so I'm open to it. You know, I think if we want change, we can do it. But I think it's correct to say that I think that balance is essential. And if you're not ready to do a parking structure, then you have to step back from any of these plans. Two other quick notes, because it's mealtime constraints, like I think you have to think about how you can get DoorDashers and Uber Eats drivers in and out without tying up spaces at mealtime when people are trying to go to restaurants and actually eat. I've bailed on going to restaurants on Broadway at times, like a lunchtime at Saturday, because I just can't park at all, can't stop, and just gave up, went somewhere else. I'd also note circulation's a big issue. It impacts safety because if you force more circulation, Lot P, which is a pretty good lot as these things go, is not accessible, but for one route, which is pretty messed up. It's something we tried to address. I think I spent a decade trying to get it addressed at the Traffic Safety and Parking Commission with no success. So that was all I wanted to contribute. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Come on up.
Just a reminder to participants on Zoom, we do not allow public comments online.
Since it seems to me like all the concerns, like what Ms. Singh, the council, is about parking. Like the beginning I mentioned at the beginning how the parking issue is. And what we heard from every one of us here, including public, including the people that are doing the issue, is parking. Now, like what she was saying, any structure has to be built. You have to consider the traffic impact on it every time. Without any, otherwise we're going to be having problem of that, you know, any building structures. Now I have some concern about, not concern, just questions. The project that for Broadway improvement, is it, one of the thing is I didn't see the redundancy of mass transit. He indicated his access to transit. So I don't know if he can elaborate on that, what access is. To me, redundancy is a shuttle to the train, a train above the ground, train below the ground. Those were our redundancy to me. So access to currently you have a shuttle that goes from Millbrae to Broadway only and dumps the people it's a free of charge from Burlingame, and it dumps them at Broadway, but it doesn't take them to Burlingame station of Caltrain. We'd like to see those kind of mass transit redundancy. I didn't see any redundancy in his plan, so I would like for him to consider redundancy so people can have an option besides the car, besides walking, beside bicycle lane. Bicycle lane is not redundancy to the train or mass transit. Bicycle lane are just mode of transportation. So we have to make a clear distinction between the two. Again, when we do that, trip generation is also is important to see how many people are coming, where they're coming from. Then we assess accordingly for the parking, because they're gonna come and then they're gonna be in the shopping center and stuff like that. I mean, in the area. So my proposal for future for parking is very crucial and very important, especially on that and on the existing parking on Ralston and El Camino. That's by the city we have. So improving that, it's gonna improve a lot of movement and mobility for the people, even without cars. So if we're heading to the zero fatality, serious injuries, 2050 by the state mandate, we have to look seriously on how to reduce the fatality by doing what? Doing mass transportation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? All right, then I will close the public hearing and we can have additional discussion. If there is any.
I think I've spoken my piece. I grew up, I've been there since 1972. So I know the changes that have occurred over the last umpteen years, 50 years or so. And the amount of parking and constriction on those streets, I think, again, we have to look at a broader area and not just those 3 streets. I mean, whatever you do on Broadway will impact the 2 or 3 streets outside of that. And so I would please have you look at all those streets.
So during COVID, we chose to shut Broadway down on the weekends, test that out, and it had some success, but it also had quite a few complications with being able to use the side streets and have access because they're parked. So there is some probably data and conversations that came out of that opportunity and experiment that could prove useful in this situation. But I would encourage us to look at one-way solutions to be able to, because right now I actually can barely get my car down Broadway now. I don't think there's an 11-foot lane there. So I think that as we really look at what is truly there from building to building, it's less. And it's, we're already putting speed bumps on Carmelita to slow people down. But I think that there needs to be some way to leverage some of these side streets better, not from a parking, but from a traffic. Because I haven't seen anywhere where we've built less parking and yet had people work out.
But do you think that if people that live in those areas need to get parking permits, then maybe, and you have a limited 1-hour parking unless you have a permit, do you not think that maybe that could help alleviate some of the cars that, I'm not saying that cars park there to go to the airport, but the cars that park there for days on end. I know that when Safeway was being built and we're on Cypress, I know that all of Cypress was backed up with cars parked there. And so the people from El Camino to Central came together and they put on 2-hour parking there. We didn't do it at our second part of the part of the street, but on that first part they did. And I think if you do 1-hour parking, unless you live there and you can prove that you live there with an address and a driver's license, maybe that's that could help with some of the parking on the streets. I don't know.
Well, but we've even on Sanchez, I think on Carmelita, we're parking one side during part of the day and parking the other side the other part of the day, and no parking during commute. So those, I think we're going to have to look at more of those traffic relieving strategies that are not nice to residents if we're going to solve any of this. Because our streets are tight.
It's only going to get worse with new ADU rules where you don't
Right.
have to have parking structure, garages on private land, and, you know, density is being put to the forefront, but then how do you use the area?
Well, like Jennifer said, you're going to start parking in front of your house, right? Like, really? Like,
And, you know, we have the whole Bayshore development plans of these thousands of workers that are going to hopefully patron Broadway as well. Where are they all going to park in the middle of the day?
I just wanted to add, I think you mentioned perhaps that a lot of the people parking on the side streets were people who were working in Broadway, and so they were there for much larger periods of the day. I think if we were going to explore parking permits, we'd also need to look and make sure that how the public parking is configured at the Broadway lots. I know some of the lots in downtown Burlingame are configured specifically to help out workers there that have long-term parking, and others are very, very short-term. So that's another, I think, a give and take that we'd have to accommodate for is, do we have enough to help those guys out? I think also, I just wanted to add as well, I think if people had, perhaps this is just an assumption, but if people had different assurances about whether or not the train station was going forward and maybe breaking ground in the next year, that might be affecting things a lot. If we knew that was happening, I would say yes. I think Broadway, if done carefully, can accommodate a lot of this. Since we don't know that, I would say yes with a really big fat asterisk. I think that what makes a lot of sense is, again, looking at things from not just Broadway, the street, but how does the neighborhood accommodate people getting from one side to the other, traffic, parking. It's very finely balanced, but that's all I had.
Any other comments? There's no action. No. Okay.
Thank you for your comments. I'm sure the consultant has recorded all of that, and they'll continue moving forward with the Broadway specific plan.
All right. Moving on to agenda item number 9, staff or commissioner reports. Were there any commissioner reports? No, she went off mute, but no. All right, how about staff?
Sure. The only thing I wanted to report is that the appeal hearing for the Mercy High School project, gymnasium project, has been set for the March 3rd City Council meeting.
All righty.
Can I add one thing? Several months ago, we had a discussion about home occupation permits and the customer visit discussion about do we increase the number of customer visits from 3 to 6? Do we do indoor versus outdoor? Is this ringing a bell? City Council discussed it at their last meeting, and direction they provided for staff was to increase the allowable customer visits to 6, and then to add some discretion to the community development director on a case-by-case basis if there is a situation that arises that would warrant allowing for more than 6 visitors. So just an update on how that discussion is going. So you will see in the future a zoning code amendment with those modifications coming to you for recommendation to City Council.
Thank you. And I will adjourn our meeting at 8:54 p.m.